A struggling mechanic, a broken wheelchair, and a wealthy woman searching for hope. What happens next will touch your heart forever. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kind Soul Stories and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. In Dallas, Texas, 27-year-old Ethan struggled to keep his small garage alive. Each morning, he woke before sunrise, unlocked the rusty shutter, and inhaled the scent of old oil and iron that clung to the air. The place was more than a shop. It was his last thread of hope. Customers were few, bills stacked on his desk, and every night he wondered how much longer he could hold on. Yet Ethan's hands never stopped working, because fixing engines gave him peace. It was the only thing that kept him from drowning in his worries. His garage was tucked away on the edge of town, where broken-down vehicles lined the road. Some belonged to neighbors who still trusted him. Others had been abandoned by owners who couldn't afford the repairs. Ethan, with grease on his hands and determination in his heart, kept moving forward. He wasn't just fixing cars, he was fighting for survival. His dream of running a successful shop seemed far away, but he refused to let it go. One warm afternoon, when the sun hung low and his tools clattered against the silence, a sleek black SUV rolled into the driveway. Ethan wiped his forehead, expecting another wealthy client who would probably question his simple garage. Instead, the back door opened slowly, and a woman in her early 30s was helped out by her driver. She sat in a wheelchair, elegant yet fragile, her eyes scanning the place with a hint of hesitation. Ethan froze, surprised. The woman's name was Claire, a successful businesswoman who had once been known for her independence and ambition. But a tragic car accident had stolen her ability to walk, leaving her world dimmer and her heart heavier. Even though she carried herself with grace, her eyes revealed the pain of battles fought in silence. Her wheelchair had broken down, leaving her stranded. With reluctance, she turned to Ethan, her voice soft yet strong, asking if he could take a look. Ethan knelt by the chair, his hands brushing against the worn wheels and damaged frame. He looked up and saw the strength she tried to hide. There was sadness, yes, but also resilience, a fire that had not been extinguished. "I'll fix it," he said, his voice steady. Claire studied him, unsure whether to believe this struggling mechanic in a dusty garage. But something in his sincerity eased her doubt. For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes, fragile but alive. That evening, long after the garage closed, Ethan stayed behind. The silence of the shop was broken only by the hum of his tools and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He wasn't just repairing machinery anymore, he was building something far more important. As he worked on the wheelchair, his hands moved with a different kind of urgency, as though he was piecing together more than bolts and metal. He was stitching hope back into someone's life, and strangely, it gave him strength too. He thought of how life could change in a single moment. Claire had gone from walking freely to being confined to a chair, while he had gone from dreaming of success to fighting for survival. Yet here they were, two broken souls colliding in an unlikely place. Ethan realized he wasn't simply repairing wheels, he was helping someone reclaim freedom, and in return he felt his own purpose being restored. It wasn't about money, it was about meaning. As midnight approached, Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow, studying the chair. The frame still needed adjustments, the motors still needed precision, but something inside him whispered that this was just the beginning. He could do more than repair, he could transform. He saw possibilities others ignored. Maybe it was foolish, but he believed that with the right design, Claire could move with ease again, maybe even rediscover a piece of the life she thought she lost. The next morning, Claire returned, wheeled into the shop by her driver. She expected to find the chair ready, but instead she found Ethan surrounded by sketches and scraps of metal. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "I can fix it," he said, "but I think I can make it better, stronger, something that fits you, not just your condition." Claire was taken aback by his words. She had met countless doctors and specialists, but none had spoken with such conviction. She studied him quietly, wondering why this struggling mechanic cared so much. Perhaps it was pity, or perhaps it was something deeper. Either way, his determination touched her. She nodded slowly, giving him permission. Ethan's heart raced. For the first time in months, he felt alive, like his hands were shaping a miracle, rather than just metal. As he turned back to his tools, Claire watched him work, a faint smile tugging at her lips, as if she too wanted to believe. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind buzzed with designs, lightweight alloys, reinforced motors, frames that moved like legs rather than wheels. He knew people would call him crazy, but he didn't care. This wasn't about reputation or profit. It was about giving someone their life back, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment. Ethan whispered to himself, "I can do this." And deep down, he knew this moment could change not only Claire's life, but his own as well. Over the following weeks, Ethan devoted himself to the project as if his entire life depended on it. The garage transformed. From a simple repair shop into a workshop of dreams. Sheets of scrap metal, worn-down motors, and half-forgotten tools covered the floor, yet each piece was a building block of something extraordinary. Ethan spent long hours sketching, measuring, and welding. His eyes burned from sleepless nights, but his heart kept him awake. This was more than a machine. It was a gift, a promise of freedom for a woman who had nearly forgotten how freedom felt. Claire visited often, her driver parking quietly outside the dusty garage. At first, she had come with doubt, expecting nothing more than repairs. But each time she saw Ethan hunched over the glowing sparks of his welder, her skepticism softened. His determination wasn't for show, it was genuine. She found herself lingering longer, asking questions about his process, watching his careful hands bend metal with patience. Slowly, she began to admire the man who refused to let hardship kill his purpose, even while struggling with his own battles. The prototype began to take shape. Unlike the bulky wheelchairs she had grown used to, this one was sleek, lightweight, and fitted with modified motors that moved smoothly. Ethan tested every piece again and again, sometimes collapsing into a chair out of exhaustion. Yet every time Claire returned, he greeted her with a tired smile that somehow gave her strength. She had spent years surrounded by people who spoke in terms of money and deals. Ethan spoke only of possibilities and hope. One evening, as the orange glow of sunset bled through the garage windows, Claire broke the silence. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked softly. She had paid doctors, engineers, and specialists before, and yet none had offered this level of devotion without mentioning cost. Ethan paused, wiping grease from his hands, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet honesty. "Because everyone deserves a chance at freedom," he replied. The words struck her deeply, breaking through walls she had built to protect her heart. In that moment, Claire realized Ethan wasn't just repairing a wheelchair. He was repairing something inside her that had been broken since the accident. Her confidence, her joy, even her belief in humanity, things she thought were gone forever, were slowly returning. She found herself laughing at his jokes, staying late to share coffee while he worked, and even telling him stories from her past. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a patient, but as a person. The night before the first test run, Ethan barely slept. He tightened every bolt twice, polished the frame until it shone, and adjusted the controls for comfort. His hands trembled not from fatigue but from anticipation. What if it didn't work? What if he had promised too much? He thought about Claire's smile, her fragile hope, and prayed he wouldn't let her down. The garage smelled of metal and oil, but to Ethan, it smelled like possibility, the birth of something that could change a life forever. When Claire arrived the next morning, the garage seemed brighter, as though even the sunlight knew something important was about to happen. The sleek motorized chair stood ready, gleaming in the light. Claire gasped softly, her eyes widening at the transformation. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, powerful yet graceful, sturdy yet elegant. Ethan rolled it toward her, his face filled with nervous pride. "It's ready," he whispered. The air grew thick with anticipation as her driver helped her into the seat. Her fingers gripped the controls, her breath shaky, as if she were about to leap into unknown waters. Ethan stood close, watching every movement. Slowly, the chair whirred to life, the smooth hum filling the silence. Claire pressed forward, and the chair glided across the floor as though it had wings. The sensation of freedom hit her instantly. For the first time since her accident, she felt movement that wasn't restricted, wasn't heavy. She wheeled toward the open garage door, the sunlight spilling across her face. Then, without warning, laughter burst from her lips. It was light, unrestrained, and filled with joy Ethan had never heard from her before. She steered the chair onto the quiet street, the wind brushing against her face, her hair dancing freely in the breeze. She hadn't felt this alive in years. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, his chest tightening, not from exhaustion but from emotion. That sound, her laughter, was worth more than any payment he could ever receive. For him, it was enough. The neighborhood watched in awe as Claire wheeled gracefully down the street. Children stopped their games, neighbors peeked through windows, and whispers spread quickly. People had grown used to seeing her hidden away, carried in and out of cars, her face shadowed with sorrow. Now they saw her radiant, smiling, alive again, and at the center of it all was Ethan, the struggling mechanic who had given her back a piece of herself. Soon, the whispers grew into a story told across the town. Some said he was crazy to dedicate weeks of his time without asking for money. Others said it was a miracle, a gift from someone who had nothing yet gave. Everything. For Ethan, none of the attention mattered. He never wanted recognition. Each time Claire visited after that first test, the joy in her eyes was the only reward he needed. She spoke more, freely, laughed more often, and carried herself with a confidence that seemed to grow each day. Ethan continued refining the chair, making adjustments based on her feedback. He installed softer suspension for bumpy roads, customized the seat for comfort, and even added subtle design touches that reflected her elegance. Claire, in return, began to notice things about him too, the way his eyes softened when he spoke about his late father, the quiet resilience he carried, and the humility that made him stand apart from everyone else she knew. Slowly, admiration turned into something deeper, though neither dared to name it. Late one evening, Claire sat in the glowing garage while Ethan tightened the final adjustments. "Do you ever think about leaving all this behind?" she asked, gesturing toward the worn walls and oil-stained floor. Ethan smiled faintly. "Sometimes, but then I realize this place is where I make a difference, even if it's small." Claire's eyes lingered on him, realizing his difference wasn't small at all. It was changing lives, especially hers. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," but Ethan only nodded, his heart too full for words. By the end of those weeks, Claire was no longer the woman who arrived in silence, weighed down by sorrow. She had rediscovered her voice, her laughter, and her strength, and Ethan was no longer just the struggling mechanic on the edge of town. He had become the man who dared to believe in hope when no one else did. Together, without realizing it, they had built something greater than a machine. They had built trust, friendship, and the beginning of something that could change them both forever. Months had slipped by since Claire first rolled into Ethan's dusty garage. The seasons changed, and with them, the town seemed to move forward, but Ethan remained in his small corner of Dallas. His garage was quiet now, filled only with the soft hum of tools and the faint smell of oil. Business had slowed, bills piled up, and though he carried himself with quiet resilience, he often wondered if he had chosen the wrong path. Still, he found solace in the memory of Claire's laughter that night she first rode her new wheelchair. Ethan leaned against the worn wooden counter, wiping his hands on an old rag. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, casting long shadows through the dusty windows. He thought of his father's words, once spoken in the same garage. "Fixing things isn't just about machines, son. It's about people." Ethan sighed deeply. He had given his heart to building that chair for Claire, but now he wondered if that was the peak of his life's purpose, one bright moment in a lifetime of struggle. Suddenly, a low rumble stirred the air. At first, Ethan thought it was thunder rolling in from the horizon, but as it grew louder, the sound became distinct rotors cutting through the sky. He stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the evening light. His breath caught in his chest. A helicopter was descending, its blades whipping up a whirlwind of dust and leaves, scattering them across the street. Neighbors rushed from their homes, pointing and murmuring in disbelief. Helicopters never landed here, not in this quiet Dallas neighborhood. The chopper touched down in the open field near Ethan's garage, sending waves of noise and wind across the street. Ethan's heart pounded as the side door slid open. From inside, a figure emerged slowly, stepping down the metal stairs. His eyes widened, his throat tightening as he realized who it was, Claire. But she wasn't the same woman who had once arrived in a broken wheelchair, her spirit heavy with sorrow. She stepped forward, radiant, supported by the very chair Ethan had built walking with. Newfound strength. The crowd gasped as they watched her move. Children clung to their parents, whispering in awe, while the elderly shook their heads, unable to believe the transformation. Claire's elegance was undeniable. Her tailored suit shimmered in the fading sunlight, her hair swept neatly by the breeze, but it was her smile that captivated everyone, the smile of a woman reborn. She walked toward Ethan, her eyes glistening with emotion, the chair's sleek design glowing beneath her. Ethan stood frozen, unable to comprehend the sight unfolding before him. Before he could speak, Claire reached him and wrapped her arms tightly around his shoulders. For a moment, time stopped. Ethan felt the warmth of her gratitude, the weight of her journey pressed against him. She whispered through tears, her voice trembling yet filled with strength. "You gave me back more than freedom, you gave me a life." Ethan's throat burned, his eyes stinging as he struggled to hold back tears. Around them, the crowd stood in silence, witnessing a reunion that carried the weight of miracles. Ethan finally pulled back slightly, searching her face for answers. "Claire, how? Why are you here?" His voice cracked, his disbelief raw. She smiled softly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Because you believed in me when no one else did. You didn't see money or fame or my brokenness. You just saw me, and because of that, everything has changed." Ethan shook his head, still trying to process the helicopter, the crowd, the fact that this woman, once his client, now stood before him stronger than ever. Claire turned toward the gathered neighbors, her voice carrying above the fading roar of the helicopter blades. "This man," she announced, pointing toward Ethan, "is more than a mechanic. He gave me hope when the world told me I should give up. He built something no one else could, not with wealth, but with heart, and today I am here because of him." Murmurs spread through the crowd, admiration and pride radiating from every corner. Ethan's chest tightened, humbled by her words. Then, to Ethan's astonishment, Claire clasped his hand and looked into his eyes with determination. "I want to invest in you, Ethan, not just in your garage, but in your dream. I want to turn this workshop into a state-of-the-art facility, a place where innovation and compassion meet. Together, we can build for others what you built for me." Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Ethan staggered back slightly, his voice trembling. "Why me? Why not someone bigger? Someone with more to offer?" Claire's smile deepened, tender yet firm. "Because," she said warmly, "you gave when you had nothing to give. You believed in me when no one else did. And now it's my turn to believe in you." The weight of her words settled over Ethan like sunlight breaking through clouds. His eyes, blurred with tears as memories of sleepless nights, endless struggles and quiet sacrifices, rushed back. For years, he had been the invisible man at the edge of town, fighting to survive. Now, in front of his neighbors, he was being seen not as a failure, but as a beacon of hope. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers rising into the air. Children clapped, adults wiped their eyes, and even the old skeptics nodded in approval. Ethan looked around. At faces he had known for years, faces that had often looked past him, now filled with admiration. His heart swelled, overwhelmed by the moment. He turned back to Claire, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say." Claire squeezed his hand gently. "Don't say anything. Just keep building. Just keep giving people hope." That night, as the helicopter lifted off again, the town buzzed with excitement. Word spread quickly across Dallas. The struggling mechanic whose kindness had changed a billionaire's life was no longer struggling. Ethan's garage would soon be transformed, funded not by luck or chance, but by compassion rewarded. As he stood in the doorway of his workshop, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Instead, he was ready for it, his heart burning with purpose. In the days that followed, trucks arrived carrying new equipment, fresh paint covered the weathered walls, and Ethan's small garage evolved into something extraordinary. But beyond the machines, the true transformation lay in Ethan himself. He was no longer just a mechanic fixing broken cars. He was a builder of second chances, a craftsman of hope. Claire visited often, not just as a partner but as a friend. Her presence a constant reminder of why he began this journey. Together, they had turned pain into possibility. Ethan often found himself reflecting on the path that led him here. It wasn't wealth, fame, or ambition that changed his life. It was compassion, the simple act of caring for someone without expectation. And as the sun set over his new workshop, casting a golden glow on the shining doors, Ethan finally understood his father's words. Fixing things wasn't about machines, it was about people, about healing what was broken inside as much as what was broken outside. And in that truth, Ethan found his miracle. From that day forward, Ethan's name carried a different weight in Dallas. No longer was he the struggling mechanic, barely keeping his doors open. He became a symbol of kindness, proof that compassion could turn struggle into miracles. The helicopter's landing was remembered as the moment everything changed. But those who knew the story understood it began much earlier in a quiet garage, with a man who refused to give up on hope. And as Ethan looked to the future, he carried that hope like fire in his soul.